Colin Murphy.
Thanks, Corla. I think the name of this bill is really important, the fact that it's called the Climate Emergency Measures Bill, because politically, just like we say with the housing crisis, it's vital to call things for what they are and to say that we have an emergency, a catastrophe which threatens humanity. Because instead of recognising that, political leaders around the world, because of the interests that they represent, be that agribusiness or be it fossil fuels, they largely fiddle while our planet burns, ignoring the severity of the problem, paying lip service to it, while we hurtle towards a climate disaster. I think the most simple point to point out, to demonstrate again and again in the course of this debate, because it's absolutely unanswerable, is the fact that the known fossil fuels reserves that exist are already 4 or 5 times the amount that can be burnt without increasing the global temperature above the 2-degree limit agreed in Paris, which would be catastrophic. It's as simple as that. It's an unanswerable, open and shut case as long as the profits and the share price of the fossil fuel industry doesn't come into it. Even that 2-degree limit is too high. Globally, temperatures have already increased by almost 1 degree, which is enough over time to melt half the ice in the Arctic, as well as to create the basis for a massive increased occurrence of extreme weather events, including droughts and floods. We already see this. This isn't something in the dim and distant future. It's something that is happening right now. Global temperatures are on the rise. 16 out of the 17 warmest years on record have happened since 2001. Global warming has been concentrated in the past 35 years. In Iraq in 2016, temperatures hit 54 degrees Celsius. It's close to the point at which humans cannot survive outside. In Ireland, we know that 6 of the 10 warmest years have occurred since 1990. And the consequence of that rapid change in our environment is immense. The environment isn't something separate, isn't something external to human society, to how we have to live. Marx brilliantly captured that idea by explaining that nature is our second body. We cannot function without it, and yet capitalism is destroying it. The consequence is seen in the thousands dying as a result of unnecessary, not inevitable, extreme weather events that are caused by this climate change. That figure is set to rise to up to 150,000 a year to die from extreme weather events by the end of this century. 14 million people have already been made homeless due to extreme weather events. The impact on agriculture is already being seen in terms of the threat to bees. In Germany, 3/4 of all flying insects have disappeared over the past 25 years. The impact in terms of biodiversity, in terms of agriculture, in terms of sustainability of human existence is already and is going to become more devastating. The impact on the Great Barrier Reef, 95% of which has now suffered from bleaching, largely irreversible, is the canary in the coal mine in terms of the devastating impact of the policies pursued. The impact in terms of millions of people suffering from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhoea, heat stress, a return of famine, an increase in the number of people living in areas affected by famine in the last year. Between 2030 and 2050, it's estimated that the number of additional deaths caused by climate change will be 250,000 per year because of those reasons. In Ireland, we saw Hurricane Ophelia, which left widespread damage last October. Flooding in Donegal in 2017 already cost €15 million in damages and repairs at current rates, and rain and flood damage is set to increase by 30% over the coming years. And the cause of all of this, and many more examples that I'm sure will be given in the course of the debate, is absolutely indisputable. It's carbon emissions. And the burning of fossil fuels globally is the major cause of this. And so the answer, as I started with, demanded by activists around the world, demanded by activists here today, is extremely simple. We have to keep it in the ground. Ireland's record on the environment is extremely poor. The government, the political establishment in this country should be extremely embarrassed. According to the 2018 Climate Change Performance Index, Ireland is the worst performing country in Europe in terms of taking action. It holds the #1 volume of emissions per person in Europe and the 8th highest in the world. Ireland is set to miss its EU 2020 and 2030 emission reduction targets, and greenhouse gas emissions have risen by 7% since 2015, with a consequence paid not just by people around the world and people in this country as a result of climate change, but paid financially to the tune of up to €600 million in fines. We also have the 3rd highest emissions per capita of residential energy use due to a high dependence on oil, coal and peat. If we continue on this trajectory, Ireland will not be able to cut its emission of carbon dioxide by 80% by 2050. By way of comparison, the transport sector accounts for 19% of emissions, the industrial and commercial sector for 16%, energy for 19% and waste for 3%, with agriculture, of course, the big emitter in Ireland with 33%, and the agri-food industry being a major political bloc to change here. As around the world, it's establishment politicians who lag and it's people who lead. The recent Citizens' Assembly recommended by 98% that climate change is put centre stage in Irish policy making, showing widespread support for environmental issues, 100% recommending that the state should take a leadership role and responsibility for adapting existing structures. But I thought it was Enda Kenny who gave the game away for the government and the political establishment a year or two ago in Paris when he said climate change isn't a priority for Ireland. In Paris, at a meeting to discuss climate change of all places, he gave the game away in terms of the establishment. Now we have different lip service from the government. I guess that's welcome. The Taoiseach Varadkar saying he's not proud of Ireland's role as a climate change laggard. Absolutely, there's nothing to be proud about. But is he going to do something about it? That's the real question here. From the point of view of humanity, it makes no sense to explore for more fossil fuels, fuels that cannot be burnt without destroying our environment. The only logic for exploring for more fossil fuels comes from the companies who want to increase their share price by increasing their reserves. A paper in Nature estimated that 82% of coal worldwide cannot be burned, as well as 49% of gas and 33% of oil, in order to avoid going over the 2% mark. So we simply cannot burn this, and we should pass this at second stage today, and then actually the government should implement it. We actually should pass it into law, and we should agree to keep it in the ground and send a message around the world. Just to finish with the broader question of why is this happening, I think the answer is contained in some of those points about the power of the fossil fuel industry. There's an idea which I agree with, which is to describe the era that we live in as the Anthropocene. In other words, that humanity is now having a huge impact on the environment, and particularly in terms of climate change. It explains the massive acceleration from the Industrial Revolution in terms of the increase in world temperatures. But it isn't just human society in the abstract that is having an impact on our environment. It is human society organised in the form of capitalism, in the form of private ownership of energy companies, in the form of private ownership of the means of production, and in terms of a drive for profit, where the damage to nature is externalised, where these companies don't care about the cost to nature, where humanity has been disconnected from nature as a result of that drive to profit, where just 90 major companies have created 63% of the cumulative emissions of carbon dioxide since 1751. And so, as Friedrich Engels said, we don't merely want an amelioration of the present society, but the establishment of a new one. Capitalism has outlived its usefulness for humanity. It's destroyed our environment, disrupted our climate. It's regulated 1 billion people to the slow death of starvation and malnutrition. It offers no way forward. Instead, we need a rapid and just transition to an economy based on zero emissions. It means leaving fossil fuels in the ground. It means investment in transitioning to renewable energy, in passive houses, in retrofitting, in public transport, and it means democratic planning of our economy to meet the needs of people and planet.